Hello, everybody. This is Scott Abels. I'm the co-founder and president of Prepjet. Want to welcome you to our podcast. I haven't done one in some time, but I've been busy with some other projects and, of course, my appointments with our clients. One of the things, though, that needs to be addressed, I've had a lot of emails from many of you asking about the DSM TR that came out earlier this year. Of course, it's been published. Everybody knew it was going to be published. But I need to explain to you that this is not the sort of thing that's going to suddenly change the EPPP. You have to remember something. And if you work with me and if you're one of our clients, you know that this exam is always going to be a few years behind in terms of current research. The fact is that when APA, for instance, came out with guidelines for telepsychology back in, I think, 2011, those questions, the experimental questions, probably didn't appear until maybe 2014, 2015. Now, I share this with you because I don't want you to be distracted because the DSM TR has come out, and suddenly you think that all these symptoms, diagnoses, whatever, has changed and it will affect the questions on the exam. That is simply not going to happen. It's not true. And I don't want you to worry about that. What I really would prefer that you focus on is the big six. And if you're a retake, one of the things that's going to be very important is looking at those bar graphs. Those bar graphs tell me right away. I can, when I see, and I've been seeing this a lot lately, we have people who are struggling, of course, as always, with clinical, but a lot of you are struggling also with physio. Now, as you probably know, if you're in Canada, you're not going to have a lot of training because the Canadian government believes that psychopharmacology, for instance, belongs to medical people, doctors, nurses, etc. So many applicants from Canada are totally dependent on this prep programs when it comes to learning physio and psychopathology. And many Americans who are in site went through their PsyD and PhD, they don't remember that this is a master's level exam. And many of the students that I have talked to, many of the applicants I talked to, probably had one or two courses on psychopharm or physio in general. Um, it's an interesting thing when we talk about psychopathology and we talk about physio areas of the brain and how certain disorders like Tourette's or Huntington's or Turner or Klinefelter, how they affect or emanate from an area of the brain, one would think this would all be taught, and it's not. Schools today are no longer teaching Psych 101 the way they used to in the 1990s or even in the early 2000s. Many schools seem more focused on particular types of therapy, especially in their programs, their graduate programs. So, again, remember, this is a master's level exam. It is the belief of the ASPPB that the content of the exam is reflective of what people should know at the master's level, which obviously isn't true. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a 52% failure rate in North America. Now, Ethan is here today. I got the DSM thing out of the way. Ethan is here today, one of my colleagues here at Prepjet, who works with a lot of you, and he collected some questions from our applicants and from people who are not Prepjet clients who would just like to have their questions answered. So I'll turn it over to you, Ethan, with the first question.
The first question is, why is ethics so difficult on the EPPP?
That's a good question. Ethics, why is ethics so difficult on the EPPP? I can tell you right now that if you made a list on one sheet, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper of the ethical standards, One sentence to describe the standard. The second sentence, how does it apply to myself as the therapist? Now, that's a very simplified way of having a sheet of paper that has all of the 10 standards in front of me. Now, of course, ethics also includes questions on professional issues, responding to a subpoena, tariffs off, etc. Now, about 2004, maybe 2000, I think in the early 2000s, many questions. It's probably someone calling to find out if I need help paying off my student loans. I get those on a landline or a car warranty. I don't know if you get those. So I never answer that particular line. The thing I wanted to say is that they're asking the same questions because the ethics standards have not changed. The ethical standards have not changed. The questions are difficult because they've added elements to what used to be a 3 to 4 sentence question. Now, I talk about this on one of the videos in my video library for Prepjet applicants. The question on bartering was a very straightforward question. It was probably a couple of sentences long. Today, it's got ethnicity. It brings in the wife and the husband and their relationship, a son who recently was diagnosed with something. I'm giving you examples of how they've taken something so simple and straightforward and, in my opinion, have made it intentionally more difficult. Why? I have no idea, but you will get caught up in the minutia of the question because there is a lot of minutia there. It doesn't matter that their son was recently diagnosed with autism. It doesn't matter that they're Ethiopians and they don't believe in psychotherapy. The question is asking you, if the husband were to paint the office of the therapist, this is an example, and in return, would the therapist provide therapy at no charge? It's a question about bartering, but you won't remember that unless you do one of the things that I talk about all the time in my workshops, which are free, on test taking. The last two sentences is the question, but people are trained in our life to read from the top down. And that's a mistake on the EPPP because it's really a 3-sentence question that's become a vignette. It's almost like one of the old psych orals questions that we used to have here in California, and that was a stupid test. But this is how I want you to do it. If you know what the 10 standards are, then all you've got to do is read those last 2 sentences. Those 2 sentences before the question mark, that's the question. And you will know, what are they asking me? And then you read the question and you're going to see that there's a lot of garbage here. It has nothing to do with ethnicity, religion. It has nothing to do with it. Now, there are other questions on like a question about a child that's been referred to a therapist by a school counselor because he's been acting out in school. And the school counselor wants to see the records from the therapist in terms of what's been going on during therapy. Now, this is an ethics question that we cover because we know that they're going to have a question. 1 in 6 of you will be asked a question where maybe there's a kid, there's a school counselor, and a licensed psychologist. And it has to do with what records is that school psychologist, if given permission, by whom? The parents. And is it acceptable according to the standards? Well, that's what we teach. If we can teach you the standard, then it shouldn't matter how the question is worded. You'll know the answer. Ethics isn't as hard as people think if they would just read more carefully and a little more slowly. During anyone who's taken this test, uh, my gosh, at home, you're not under the same pressure. Even if I ask you to replicate exam conditions, when you go to Pearson, everything changes. I know that. And the anxiety will slip right in there, especially if you're retake. All those bad memories are going to reappear, right? So what you have to do is you've got to sort of purge all that garbage because this is a new day. And when you read things, take your time. There are very few absolutes in psychology except in ethics. So we always look for words like always, never, because these are absolutes, right? Most of the EPPP is all research. Those are not absolutes. I guess the best way to put it is, I think because the questions are longer and have a lot more meat in them, a lot of grizzle as well, applicants get lost. They get lost in the question. And then the worst thing happens. They're torn between two answers. When that happens on any EPPP question, I can assure you, and this is important, there's one word. It's so nuanced. You would have to really take your time. There's either a word in the body of the question that's going to make A right and B wrong. Remember, what is the best answer is also the right answer, which means the others are wrong. How many times at Prepjet do we get emails from people who say, I just read question 22 and I think your answer's wrong. And after 17 exchanges with Dr. Horry or Ethan or me, they realize, oh, you're right. I didn't read it carefully. Well, if we don't change that habit now, you're going to do that at the exam. And don't deny it, because everybody does it. They all do this. They read too fast and they make assumptions as they're reading as to what they think they're being asked before they even see the question mark. So we read from the top down? No, we read from the bottom and then from the top down. The question is here, the garbage is somewhere in here, and the question is what we care about. And ethics is not more difficult. It just requires a little bit more thought, a little bit more time in reading these rather protracted questions that are essentially the same questions they were asking 10, 13 years ago, because the ethical standards have not really changed in the last decade. And just know this, because ethics, and I saw someone today, and she knew that the ethics questions seemed hard, but she didn't think they were a problem. And yet she missed 13 out of the approximately 30 questions on ethics that she had. And this is quite common. And she admitted to me she was running out of time. She was reading fast. You read fast, you miss a word, it's going to sink the ship. Ethan, next.
So the next question is, this person is studying and they've made progress. However, they haven't reached 70% in all the domains. She asks how she should continue her studies.
Well, 70% is a great goal. I mean, if you're getting 70%, say on clinical, on say tests 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, because I'm including test 6 now as a core exam. I mean, that's great. And if your overall score is 70%, that's great too, because that's in the 150s, which is more than passing. So we know that you need to get 123 in most states, or 127 in New York and one other state, out of the 200, 175 that are scored. Remember, 175 are scored, 50 are experimental and are not scored, but that doesn't mean you can't answer them. 70% is a goal. But I've had plenty of people who've scored in the high 60s and they pass, even if it's a 505. What do I care? I just want them to get a score with a 5 in front of it. And of course, you don't get to see what questions you missed. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. On one exam, you might get in clinical psych, let's say, maybe your score is 65%. On another test, it's 75%. On another test, it drops, it's 60%. On another test, it's 54%. Another test, it's 80%. Goes up and down. Well, we don't say, gee, my scores went up, my scores went down. That's actually not true because you weren't asked the same questions. The key to understanding why those scores varied is in the drop-down menus. If you watch my video, a video library on the drop-down menus, it basically tells you, I see a pattern in terms of, wow, I'm consistently missing questions on cross-cultural issues, terms and concepts. But I seem to be doing 3 out of 6 exams. I'm doing really, really well on cross-cultural for identity development models. So maybe I don't need to spend quite as much time on identity development models, but I do need to spend more time and maybe reread parts of the summaries for cross-cultural terms and concepts. So forget about the score by domain. I mean, let me say this. If you're getting 50s, okay, that's obviously someone who's not going to pass the EPPP. Now, when you're talking to me, Ethan, and you're referring to someone's overall score on tests 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, and they're not at 70%, that doesn't mean they're going to fail. It's an ideal. Now, I know that the other brands have all these hokey money-back guarantees, and I assure you they're not in the business of giving money away, okay, especially given what they charge. But I have no rule on 70 is an ideal. 70 is a C. You only need a C to pass the EPPP, right? You only need to get 123 out of 107. You're allowed to miss a ton of questions. You can miss all the statistics, learning, and memory. You can miss all the research design, test construction, all the social, all the psych assessment. You can miss all those. You can miss 30% of the OR questions, and you can still pass if you're getting 68, 67% on clinical. But remember, clinical, ethics, psychopathology are all heavily weighted. And when I work with people, I really want them to focus mostly on clinical, psychopathology, physio, and lifespan, because those 4 are going to give you close to 100 questions scored. Just imagine if you could master those, but you're not going to get them all right. But then think about ethics. You're not going to miss all the ethics. You're going to get points from ethics. And believe me, without even studying it, you're going to get probably 30 to 40% of learning and memory correct, psych assessment correct. And those extra points are what puts you over the top with a passing score. So 70% is a great goal. I'm happy with 67. It just depends on the subdomain scores. Use those drop-down menus. I mean, the reason why it's called Prepjet, I didn't pick the name. I'm the co-founder, but I didn't pick the name. But my point is, it's stealthy. We don't hold you hostage. If you went to a school and you're ESL or you have severe ADHD, yeah, you might need to be with us for more than 90 days. But if people really, really studied instead of said they read, see, they always talk about, but I've read everything. How many people have told me in a typical week, I read psychopathology and clinical this week. You don't know anything. You couldn't have read them. And if you did read them, you don't remember anything you read. There's no rule. Scott, how long should I expect to spend reading clinical? I have no idea. I don't know you. And even if we talked every week, I still wouldn't know you because I don't know how your mind works. Now, granted, if you've got 3 kids, and many of you do, for some reason, it's always 3. You have psychologists, I guess, prefer 3 over 2, but you have kids, you work a full-time job, which is not a 40-hour work week. It's more like a 50-hour work week. Yeah, you're not going to do much on work days. It's maybe 30 minutes and then you're done because you won't remember anything. And these people that study at 10, 11 at night are crazy people. They probably will fail because you're not going to remember. You just worked 8+ hours. You did a commute. You had to feed the kids. Most of my customers, they're doing everything. So they're not just working, they're helping to raise a family. And where's the self-care? When do they sleep? Weekends is where you put in those, 4 45-minute study sessions with a 15-minute break. Do that, and the odds are you're going to retain knowledge for a much longer period of time. So as far as ethics goes, I've answered that. As far as the score, listen, you want to get 140 plus questions correct, which is not 70%. It's in the 60%. You can do that. And if you do that, the odds are you're going to pass as long as you're learning while you're reading. We have about 9 minutes left. Ethan, what's next?
So the next question comes from a person that wants to resume their studies. However, they've established their baseline scores about 2 months ago and haven't studied since.
So everyone takes test 4 cold when they first start with us, and then they just stop. They haven't done
They
anything.
took about a 2-month break.
It's a weird thing. We just had a client the other day. She bought a 6-month program. She took 1 full-length exam in 6 months. Within a 5-month period. She took some quizzes in about 2 domains, and then she just didn't study at all. And then she took the exam, which made no sense to me. It's her own fault. She failed because she was not diligent. She failed because she didn't do her job. We did ours. She didn't do hers. It's very cut and dry. Now, if I seem to lack empathy, it's just that we can't spoon feed this stuff to you. You have to make the time. That's why we talk about self-care. Some of you go to the gym. Some of you do yoga. Maybe you go to Pilates. Maybe do something for yourself. Spend time with your children. Pet your dog, go for walks, go for a run. And then you spend 30 minutes on clinical. As boring as it might be, you got to do 30 minutes, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On days off, some of you work a 4-day work week, most of you work a 5-day work week. But on your days off, treat it like a job. You might do you might start a summary at, say, 9 o'clock. You'll stop at 9:45. You'll have a 15-minute break, get something to drink, stay hydrated throughout the day. Something that's very important, a lot of you don't do. Stay hydrated. After 15, 20 minutes, get back in your chair. But remember, during that break, do not stay in the chair. Stop at a hard stop at 45 minutes, and then come back, continue with that summary, and then answer the quiz questions. Just remember this. You may recognize some of this content. Some of it's going to go quickly because you're comfortable with it. You're familiar with it. Come on, you have a degree. You went to a good school. You know what you're doing. Some of this is regressive. I've talked about this for the better part of over 30 years now. Remember, this is the most regressive thing you're ever going to do. And you do have to forget sometimes what you think you know. But there's other things that you do know that can help you. But you've got to treat this like you're back in your master's program. Class lasts for 45 minutes. So you take a break, come back, finish the summary, answer the quiz questions. If you miss one, try to understand why, but go to the next summary. If you miss 2 or more, don't go to the next summary. You shouldn't have missed 2 out of 5. You wouldn't want your kids doing that, so why would you do that? I just want you to make sure you understand that those summaries are far more important than the testaholics that I inherit from other brands who all they want to do is take tests like they're drug addicts. They're addicted because the other brands, and I'm guilty of this because I did it when I was president of the 2 largest brands in North America at one time. And for 27 years, we did advocate test taking tests, more tests, test. These companies that have you taking tests over and over and over, you're memorizing answers. You're not learning anything, and you won't remember any of this. And the questions will not be worded the same. I don't care what they tell you because I've been doing this longer than they have. And we licensed all our competitors. So believe me, I know what I'm speaking of. And I say that with great respect because I'm very proud of my former brands. But at Prepjet, the reason why we're an online company is Diane goes in there and updates summaries all the time. And some of you even notice when we've updated something in clinical because you saw that it changed overnight. No one else does that. No one else does that because they don't have a Diane Edwards. We're very lucky because we've had Diane we've worked together now for close to 36 years. Diane's been doing this for 40 years. This is all she does is research the EPPP. And believe me, if you leave her alone, she knows exactly what she's doing. And that's why our people pass. The ones that don't pass, and there's always going to be 3-4% that don't pass. Sometimes in some months it's 5%, but never more than 5%, never more than a 5% failure rate in our 5 years. I'm very happy to say that. But I can tell you that Diane doesn't want to teach you psychology. She just wants to teach to the test. Go ahead, Ethan. I got only like 3 minutes. You got one more question?
Yeah, just to add on to the last question, would you recommend that they reestablish their baseline scores with a new mock exam?
No, because you know what? That just I want them to start with clinical. So here's something. If you're a Prepjet customer, you do test 4, you do clinical and psychopathology because they go together. Okay. Now, usually after that, we would take test 1. Test 1 is the polar opposite. Test 4, newer research that you could be asked about. Test 1, older research that continues to appear on the exam. Then you've got the drop-down menus to tell you, by the way, from that first test she took or he took, right away they're going to see their scores in clinical. So they know what in clinical they need to focus on. So before they even begin, that applicant would do well to look at the drop-downs from test 4 and say, wow, I need to really make sure I read brief therapies, psychodynamic and humanistic therapies, and group and family therapies. In group and family therapies, by the way, I'm very, very surprised how many applicants from even the best school, like the Chicago schools, one of the finest schools of psychology in the United States. Adler's a great school. And yet they struggle with some of the elements because no school in their right mind is going to develop curriculum for this crazy antique exam. Okay, I could use another word, but maybe a kid will see this. The point is, as I conclude, you use those drop-down menus for clinical before you read clinical from test 4. You use the drop-down menus from test 4 to remind you about what you must focus on in psychopathology. Then, after you've done that, you're going to now read these domains, and then you'll take another test, maybe test 1. Then you'll go and do, now you got 2 tests, you got 2 sets of drop-down menus to help you know in physio, what is it I need to focus on? Got 2 tests. Now I'm running out of time. There's a video, and by the way, if you're in our Facebook group, I've given an example. The test should be taken in the following order, and there's usually 2 domains in between. So we do test 4, then 1, then 6, which is super hard. 6 is the newest research. It's super, super hard. Then you would do test 2, then test 3, and then you would retake test 4, and hopefully you're ready to go. One last thing, test 5. Test 5 is if we suspect you have practice effect, because we know some of you have taken some of our exams multiple times. You've memorized answers. So we created test 5 to find out, do you actually know this stuff? Or did you make a mistake and try to memorize specific answers to specific questions? Because if you do that, just like they do elsewhere, you won't pass. Memorizing answers is simply stupid. And for people who are spending at some of these brands $1,500, $1,800, $2,000, why the hell would you want to memorize a question and an answer? And why would you think it would even be legal for a test prep company to have the wording of the questions down? Because it's illegal. It would also be unethical. Luckily, I'm not a licensed psychologist, so I don't have to worry about the ethical standards, but you do. You can't discuss what's on the test. So I just want to close by this. Strategy, self-confidence, pace, tempo, positive thoughts, reading slowly and carefully, but always being aware of time. Lately, I've talked to quite a few people that ran out of time or noticed the clock, and they might have had maybe 30 minutes left, but they had 80 questions left because they got caught in the weeds of a question. So many people do. They get caught in the weeds of a question. Don't do that. That's the oldest trick in the world by a test writer. I know exactly how they can trap you. They're going to give you a little bit of minutia, has nothing to do with the question, but there'll be a wrong answer related to it. Remember, the last 2 sentences, that's the key to you knowing what am I being asked. It'll make it a lot easier for you. Now, if you have any questions, of course, visit our website, prepjet.net. If you have any questions about our program, the basic, the plus, the premium, write my colleague Ethan at prepjet.net. If you would like to attend any of our free workshops on test taking strategies, statistics, rebuilding self-confidence for the retakes, write support at prepjet.net. We work 7 days a week. I don't, but they do. 7 days a week. We will get back to you. And poor Ethan shaking his head because he works like 5.5 days a week. Well, 5 3/4 of a day. Anyway, on that note, this is Scott Abels with Prepjet, and I want to wish you the very best in your studies. And thank you so very, very much for giving me your time today. And I'm sorry we went over by 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Goodbye.